It's always funny. Sometimes, so with StreamYard, when you're live streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube, good morning, everyone, by the way. Sometimes there is a delay, and part of this is for good editing. At the beginning, you want to be looking at the camera and smiling, but you can only keep that up for so long because sometimes you're like a grinning idiot. You're like looking at the camera, waiting for it to start, and then all of a sudden, as soon as you start looking around, going, "Did I hit the button?" And then that's when it starts. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, super products that everybody loves and enjoys every single day. But getting those products to market and making sure that they're safe, not that easy. But we know that behind the scenes, you're doing everything that you can to make sure that that happens. So Morrine, myself, and Austin wanted to say thank you for all that you do. If you're new, welcome, pull up a chair. This is the Food Safety Chat, and every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube, which sometimes starts when it should, sometimes it doesn't. And we have a discussion with you about all things food safety. And with this, you'll notice, not a lecture. This is meant to be a discussion, and that's what's so fun about this is I got to bring experts like Morrine and Austin onto the show, and experts in the chat as well who are very good at participating, and we enjoy this every single time we do it. And as Tim said, yeah, 3 of my favorite people. Thanks, Tim. Tim's a rock star on LinkedIn. If you're not connected with Tim on LinkedIn, you need to do that. He posts some amazing content, and he's got some great thoughts out there around food safety and what his company does with Pure. So make sure you're in contact with him. So with that, guys, let's dive in. So first off, how's everybody doing this morning? How did everybody have a good Labor Day weekend?
Yeah, it was great weather here too in Colorado after like 2 weeks of nonstop rain.
Yeah, and heat, and yeah, fall is definitely here. I looked outside yesterday morning. My maple tree out in the front is starting to turn. So I got some nice red leaves kind of up high, kind of sprinkled in with the other ones. How's the weather doing in Minnesota?
Temperatures are dropping drastically. We woke up to 45 this morning, I think. But Liberty was good. I spent the time resting and playing with my 3-year-old. He's not going to be 3 very much longer. I feel like I've been saying that for a very long time, that he's 3.
And then it'll be 15 before you know it. So everybody, please let us know where you're at in the world and how things are going for you. So Tim, of course, hopefully, I think Tim's at home now. Let us know if you're traveling, Tim. Hopefully not. So he's in the Nashville area out there in beautiful Tennessee as well. So, gosh, we got a ton to go over here today. So one of the things that we love to do, if you're new to the chat, is everybody please join us for a drink of your favorite beverage. Cheers. Oh, there we go. Nice. I think today the high in Colorado for us is going to be a pleasant 70 degrees. I love it. That's where I want to be. So one of the other things on the chat that we do, torture our guests, is the dad joke. Morrine, Austin, are you guys ready for the dad joke?
I don't know, man.
Go for it.
Austin, this one's just for you. So,
Okay.
I recently learned this. What does the Pope, right? So we got this new Pope, American Pope. What does he use to dry his hands? Papal towels. Feel free to use that one.
Oh, man. I'm good.
Sean, good morning to you. And so good. Tim's at home. Good for that. Yeah, so we expect to see lots of posts for you on LinkedIn then, Tim. So you got your work cut out. So, gosh, it's been a while since I've had both of you guys on. What else is going on? What's new in your worlds?
Oh, man. Morrine?
Not much is new. I think it's been lovely just growing into my new role and continuing to expand my network, and certainly getting time to reconnect with old long-time colleagues. It's sometimes we get carried away with work and we forget to reach out to our friends and colleagues. So I've been trying to do more of that this summer, and it's been fun. I got to the summit this year, and it was the highlight of my year, just being able to meet all my favorite people in one place. So I'm still glowing about that one.
Nice. And Austin, you've been traveling a ton, right, with Meritech?
I have, yeah. All over the place. Heading to St. Louis next week, and then up to Salt Lake City the week after that. So yeah, it's been great. Get to see a lot of different interesting food facilities all over the map, which is always really cool to see so many different types of processes. And then aside from that, it's been pretty low key. Been doing the bachelor thing for the past 2 weeks because my wife has been traveling for work as well. So she's been over in Europe.
Well, that's not a bad thing. Yeah. So good for her. So any cool spots in Europe that she's hitting, or?
Yeah. She did a conference in Salzburg, Vienna, and then she did a bike trip down in Portugal that she just finished up. And I'll see her tomorrow for the first time in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good for her. That's awesome. Yeah. It's always good to take some time and see new perspectives, which really, perfect segue, what we're talking about here today is perspective. And part of this is, I was thinking about this as we were getting ready for our chat here today, is the familiar is important. And the title of our chat is The Danger of the Familiar. And that's a really important thing, especially what we do in food safety. But routine is an important part of our lives. And we don't even really think about it, because routine is routine. So the example I've always been taught around routine and the importance of routine from an efficiency standpoint is things like your morning routine. So pretty much we all do the same thing when we get up in the morning. So with Morrine, she has a 3-year-old alarm clock, which probably wakes her up much earlier than she would like. And we get up and we start making breakfast, and we start the coffee, and we go to the bathroom and we brush our teeth, and these things are just not, we don't even really have to think about it. And that's part of the important part of a routine. Imagine if you had to every single day find your toothbrush, because every day you leave it in a different spot. Sometimes it's in your office, sometimes it's out on the back deck, it's in the car, and you have to go on a half-hour hunt for your toothbrush. Nope, it's always in the same spot. It's right there by your sink on the right-hand side in the holder. The toothpaste is down in the drawer, and you just follow through on your routine. You get it done, you get it out of the way, and you move on to those other things that your brain needs to do during the day, and you save that brain power, because your brain uses an enormous amount of energy. It was like 40% of your energy in your body goes for your brain. Mm-hmm. And we have to be very careful in how we use that energy, because we all know that feeling at the end of the day, if you use too much, right, we're drained, and we need to repair and recover. So routines are a way of helping to minimize that activities. And you even see this with entrepreneurs. You'll hear like super successful entrepreneurs will say, I wear the same thing every day. Steve Jobs, right? He looked the same every day. And on the chat, I wear the same shirt for the chat every single time. I don't have to worry about it. I go in my closet, I grab the shirt that I wear on the chat. I don't have to think about it. It's done. It's part of the routine of doing these things. But there's also a risk with routine. And we see this all the time in plants. And we go in and there's dangers and things that we don't even really think about. And we go in and we look at these things every single day, and we don't even think about them, do we?
Yeah, I mean, and Sean just kind of hit on it, right? He said routine boredom often leads into sleepwalking through your workday. And that's exactly kind of what we're going to be talking about, is those things that can be laying right in front of us that are problematic or introduce risk to the facility that you just don't see because it's always there.
And we think that we're saying that figuratively, Austin, but it's literally true. We don't see it. People think that our vision, and we've talked about this before, is we have this open slate in front of us, and we are taking everything in with equal importance. False, absolutely false. There's too much information out there. We cannot process it all. So our brain has a spot that we focus on, and that spot is constantly moving. And after a while, just like the routine of our toothbrush, that puddle that's over on the floor that everybody walks through and tracks God knows what through the plant, we just don't even see it anymore because we ignore it. Our brain has filtered that out for us, hasn't it?
Yep. It was interesting. I didn't think about it till now. I should have shared this video that was a psychological kind of experiment where it's from back in the 60s, and it's a round group of people passing a basketball back and forth, and their task is to count how many times that basketball is passed. And I think there's multiple balls going around. And as you do it, you count it, and then when you do the playback of the video, there's actually a man in a monkey suit who walks through the frame that you don't even notice whenever you're counting the basketballs, because you're so fixated on counting the basketballs that you don't see the guy in the gorilla suit walk through. And it shows how hyperfixation, whenever we're on a task, we miss really big stuff that happens.
Yeah, because we've told our brain the important thing in this picture is the basketball. And so then our brain follows the movement of the basketball and ignores the gorilla. And if you want to try this, and so as Austin was telling that story, which is, I've done this too, and yeah, if you know the trick, you're going to see the gorilla. But if you don't, I put the link in here for one of these tests on YouTube, and they call this let's see, so this guy is called, selective illusion is what this is called. And I put a link in here for everybody. Try it. If you're on the trick, you're going to see the gorilla. But show this to somebody you know and say, "Hey, come here and look at this and watch this basketball. This is really weird." And then at the end, watch how amazed they are.
The first time I saw it, I did not see the dude and the gorilla at all. I was like, "No, they're messing with me." And let me back it up and go and watch the original, because they just put that in for the second playthrough, and it was like, nope, it was there the whole time.
Yeah, and it's not the gorilla like poking his head in a little bit and poking out.
Nope.
It's they walk through the scene. The one I've seen is he waves.
I think he waves at the camera.
Yeah, and then strolls out the other side. Have you ever tried that, Reen? Have you ever tried that experiment?
No, I haven't, but I've heard enough about that analogy. It's a common one when we're talking about selective attention to what matters.
Yep. And so to kind of get it going here, we wanted to start off with some examples in plants of things that we selectively ignore. So we've mentioned like puddles on the floor, right? There's that area that the roof, every time it rains, it drips and there's a puddle on the floor. Or there's a machine that has condensate that's always dripping on the floor and it collects there. What are some other examples of things that you guys see that people just tune out?
I'd like to perhaps do something a little different, Bryan. I'd like to step back a little bit and just engage the audience in why we have routines in the food industry in general, right? Our industry is highly regulated, and the preventive controls that we need to think about are critical, right? So it's important to have a standardized way of doing things so that we remove the variability. You don't want people to have to make a decision about what temperature controls for pasteurization, or how long should I have the sanitizer before I change it. So making those decisions ahead of time is not a luxury, it's a necessity for us to be able to do our work and do it well. It's when we remove the critical thinking that things start to become a problem. And I think that's what we're talking about today. Is the routines are relevant and they're important and they need to be there. And how do we go one step further than that? Is we have routines, but we also need continuous improvement. The only way to continuously improve is to see where there are problems. So how do we blend those two things? How do we preset the pasteurizer so it's always functioning, but be able to recognize when it's no longer doing what it's supposed to do? And my favorite one is always the alarms attached to either equipment for safety or CCPs, where if something goes wrong, the alarm goes off. But if you have a system that's always going off, then it doesn't do its work anymore. It just becomes this loud thing in the background, kind of like a humming air vent. It's just a white noise in the background. And so the alarm goes off, nobody does anything because it's always going off. So how do we optimize systems so that when the alarm goes off, it actually means something? That one's a big one for me in general, and a lot of folks I talk to, seems to be the repetitive comment is we have this notifications. It can be a test has failed, you get a notification, or the team gets an email about something. If those emails keep coming, then people tune them out because they're not relevant. They're not really telling me anything different.
Yep. Exactly. Well, and part of it on that piece relative to the routine, the toothbrush analogy as well, is you have your work routine too, right? You have your home routine and you have your work routine. So if I'm a quality manager in a plant, I get to the plant at 8 in the morning. The first things I do, and I go get my cup of coffee. I poke my head into the lab and say good morning to everybody. I go to my office and start reading emails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a routine I follow for my job. I don't go into my role, say, today I'm going to disrupt everything I do. I'm not going to get coffee. I'm going to run around in the plant first and do other things. Like, you're going to look at you like, what are you doing, right? It's not normal human behavior. We want those routines. And those things that are out of the routine, the puddle on the floor, the machine that has the blinking warning light, the buzzer that's going off, are not part of that routine. And we don't look for those. And part of, I think, what we wanted to do here today for everybody as well is to start thinking of those things and pull you out of that routine piece and start thinking about these and look at those from that perspective. This is why, for example, when a auditor or I go into a plant, or Austin goes into a plant, or Morrine, you go into one of your plants, we don't have a routine for that plant. We're visiting there as the first-time person. And our heads are on swivels, as the saying goes, right? If I'm in a new production facility I've never been in, I'm doing this. I'm looking everywhere. And the person who's with me, they're just kind of like walking through the plant, but I'm looking around going, what's that? What's this? What's that? Because I want to learn as much as I can about that plant. And I'll see these things and I'll say, hey, what's that puddle over there? Why do you guys have a puddle of water? And they'll be like, huh? And then they'll kind of wake up and go, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we had a leak. How long's that leak been there? Yeah, right? And you're breaking them out of that cycle, and they've got to think about it. And a lot of times you'll get a comment back along the lines of, wow, you're so observant. No, it's just I'm a, as we call it, a fresh set of eyes. I'm going in there without the routine built into my patterns. So I see things that other people don't see or pay attention to.
Yeah, when I go in to these facilities, and I'm specifically looking for hygiene, improvements, right? So it's either hand hygiene, footwear, even wheeled traffic, and looking at where potential, vectors that could be bringing in some type of issue for the facility. And, one of the big ones that we look at is, traffic pattern. And especially in these facilities that are a little bit older, we see doors everywhere. I see doors everywhere. And I start asking those questions, right? Like, what happens with this door? Where does this lead? Does it go outside? Who's using it? Right. And figuring out, what can be done about that particular door, because there's the idea of like, well, it's always been there. Maintenance uses it to go from this area to this area. And it's like, well, if we is it possible to close that door off to limit so that we can kind of funnel through a different door where we have, sinks or boot scrubbers or whatever is needed to make sure that the hygiene aspect is taken care of. And that's where you kind of see the like, well, I guess we could, I never really thought about it before. And that's one of the areas, and even just looking at all those ingress and egress points, and it's like, okay, well, I come in and all I'm looking for is, how are people going to bring something into this facility that we don't want to be brought in on their hands, feet, or like a pallet jack. And that to me is another interesting one. It's almost like a foreign supplier verification type of process, because it's like, well, what are all the things that are being introduced to the facility that could potentially be problematic, down to the milk crates, or the wooden pallets. That's, there was one facility I saw and they kept getting hits on listeria, and then they tracked it down to the pallets that were coming in from the supplier. But but yeah, like you said, the head on the swivel thing, or, from the mouths of babes. It's it's the person coming in who doesn't really know their facility that well, going, well, what about this? And that's always an interesting, you always get interesting responses.
Yeah, there's a bit of cognitive dissonance with that, right? Because they know they should see it, and they're embarrassed that they don't. But this is the advantage of bringing someone in. So your examples are perfect, Austin, because you learn things from other facilities, and then that gets put into your process of things that you look at, and you're able to transfer that knowledge to that new location. I mean, why do people become good at their jobs? They become good at their jobs because they become efficient. What is efficiency? Efficiency is automating a lot of these activities. The analogy I use is I'm a terrible golfer. People who are good at golf, they just swing the club, right? And you're just like, oh my God, how did you do that? And they're like, well, what do you mean, right? They've automated that process, and every part of their body knows what to do to replicate that perfect swing. And if you're good at what you do, that's the same thing. The operator who's running that filling machine has learned to be efficient at that process. Does that mean that that's the right efficiency? Maybe, maybe not. Sean had a good point here as well, too. Thanks for these comments, Sean. So during the Gemba walks, when he's going to plants, this is a great observation, because if you're a visitor in a plant and you go on a tour of the plant, they're going to take you on the same tour that they always go on, right? Here's how we do a tour. So he forces them out of that perspective by actually leading the tour. Oh, good idea. Really good idea. Now, some plants may not. Some plants may have, they want to avoid areas, right? They don't want you going in areas. That weird door you were talking about, Austin, that goes to the maintenance area that they don't want you going through, right?
And I think, Austin, what you were talking about earlier in terms of risk assessment and what you look for as an outsider, I'd like to extend that a little bit into developing the HACCP plan and how we develop HACCP plans. So oftentimes, especially at the corporate level, those are developed by people at the corporate office who do a generic risk assessment based on FDA's list of items and the potential risks associated with those items. How often do you see risk assessment including the Gemba walk and then incorporating what you've learned about? I mean, when you're doing risk assessment, there's the risk inherent to the ingredient, but then also risk associated with the process itself and the people and their skills. And so something might be problematic for newcomers, for example, how to operate a specific machine. If you're new to the process, the risk is different than somebody who's well-versed in doing that process over and over again. And so incorporating all of that as part of what's routine versus what's being learned actively versus what needs to improve, and the overhaul of, we've always done this way. Well, sure, that's great, but things get better, science gets better, we get better as a people, as an industry. So even though we've always done it this way, it might have been okay for the last 20 years. As things change, as systems improve, hopefully your company is not exactly what it was 20 years ago, otherwise you probably wouldn't be in business. So every unit is evolving, and even how we do risk assessment needs to evolve. And while routines are great, we cannot continue to do food safety and quality as routine activities. Right. Something has to change for us to get better and see risk differently.
I want to emphasize that because that's a very good point, is that we treat food safety risk as routine. We create our food safety plan. We're going to look at our chemical, physical, and microbiological hazards. And I may be very good at microbiology, and I'm kind of so-so with the other two. And my plan focuses on that. And then I put it on a shelf, and we start managing it. But in reality, as you were referencing here too, risk changes daily, and we need to recognize that. Procurement brings a new supplier on board. That risk has changed. The plant manager, we have a new plant manager. The risk in that facility has changed greatly because that plant manager is getting up to speed and she doesn't understand how that plant operates yet. Those type of risks need to be looked at. And so I think kind of one of our overall themes with our chat here today is, as food safety professionals, we need to be constantly challenging that routine and saying, just because we've done it this way, to your point, Morrine, just because we've done it that way doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And to your point, man, I hate that phrase. We've always done it that way. That's shorthand for what's efficient, but it may not be right.
I think, it's like similar to whenever I, sit down and have dinner with my wife at night, and we talk about our days, and we work in very different industries. But we talk about what happened that day or issues that we're coming across. And that's where having someone who's not in that industry she's able to ask me, well, what about, why don't you do it this way? And it's like, I didn't think about that. Because I have it in my own head, right? That it's like, this is just how it's always been done.
Yeah.
And so having that outsider voice is always a great resource, because they're not locked into, this existing culture of like, this is the way things are done. And Morrine talking about the HACCP plan, and the importance of getting out into the facility. And I think about, the conversation around people using AI to create their HACCP plans. And, and it will probably do like a great job of like checking certain boxes, right? That have the known knowns. But it's the walkthrough, and you said that one place in the facility where it's like it's always leaking, or that one place in the facility where it's like we get a lot of cross traffic through this one point from maintenance and receiving, and that it's just not going to be able to calculate for you.
Yep. On that piece of this, and as we were preparing for the chat, I was reminded of a story from my career back early on when I first had my first leadership role in food safety for a company, is how people it's amazing as human beings how we're able to become used to things, and we can pretty much accommodate ourselves to anything, and that includes danger, right? We're talking about food safety in particular, but also in production facilities, the physical danger that exists in these facilities, forklifts driving around. And when you see this, especially Austin, when you visit a plant, we were talking about this when we were getting ready for the chat, is when you're walking around in the plant and you're in between the yellow lines, they know when to look and not to look. And they're coming up to corner and you see all of them do this. And you're like, oh, okay, but something happened there in the past. Something happened there. And you're like, oh shit. And then you look too. I remember in particular, there was a machine that was very fussy in my past life. And like parts of the packaging would get stuck in the system that would rotate around. And this thing would move fast. And these operators have been running this machine for a long time, decades. And the temptation, we would try and beat this out of them, but the temptation was they want to be efficient. They want to keep running. They don't want to shut down. So they would reach in and try and grab that piece of stuck foil. And we're like, no, never do that. Shut down the machine for the love of God. And they're like, right? They had become acclimated to the danger. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, at one point, someone became hurt. It wasn't pretty. And that event really stuck with me. And that person, up to the very moment where that happened and her finger got caught in that machine, didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And she lost part of her finger from that.
And that, kind of ties into my previous life around doing work around food safety culture and working with leadership, we'll call it in the ivory tower, right? That we're putting together these strategies of, perfect world scenarios and listening to what the concerns are at the leadership level, but then getting out and into the facility and seeing the real world of how things actually go down. There's how we wish things would happen, and then there's the reality, right? And like you said, I mean, reaching into the machine and pulling stuff out, or it's almost a natural intuition in humans to find hacks, right? If something's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's easier for me to just fix it myself with this, this thing, this patch or duct tape of, and to keep things going. But then I gets back down to this, culture conversation, which is, never ending, but it's, how are we conveying the importance of not reaching into that machine and making sure that never happens again.
Right.
So it's a kind of a whole other offshoot.
Well, and we can put guards around those machines, and they'll find ways to circumvent the guards if they don't think they're needed.
Yeah.
And I think, Bryan, having Austin and I on this call, we would be remiss if we went without talking about training and just, sorry, I cannot help myself. If you think about routine in the context of developing teams and cross-functional training, think about the one person that's really efficient at doing a particular task, and they have basically found the perfect way to run that equipment, and they love it. It's predictable. It works exactly how they want it. And then something changes, technology changes, or the company grows, and so you have to reconfigure, or they just can't have it the way it's always been. Yeah. And now you want them to do something different. It can be unnerving, right? And so thinking about the impact of routine over extended periods of time on not just boredom and burnout, but also flexibility and the willingness to adapt new technologies and new skills. If you design that inherently as part of cross-training so that you are improving the skills of your personnel as well, so that no one person is stuck doing the same thing for extended periods of time, people get trained to do one thing, but over a period of time, you move them around a little bit so that they're doing more than just one thing. It builds capacity and robustness in the workforce on your team, but it also allows for people to be flexible in their mental capacity to do other things. And that kills the boredom, right? If you know that you will be doing something different, so you do this for a little bit of time and then you move and do something else, that movement back and forth helps us see things that we otherwise wouldn't see, breaking away from, we talk about this even when you're doing your work, taking a 5-minute break and coming back to the task brings a level of clarity when you have cloudness in your mind thinking about something. So I think that's a helpful way to use routine in a way that brings value to the team without having 100 new people doing the same thing all at once.
Yeah, and that's always an interesting experiment when you do that, because you're going to see resistance pop up big time, aren't you?
I expect it. I see it. I feel it sometimes.
You're going to get every reason in the world. It's going to be, I've been running this machine for 20 years. I don't want to run that other machine. This is my machine. There becomes that ownership piece. You get the excuses. This gets into the psychology piece that Austin talks about a lot, is, okay, well, you're going to pay me more, right? They don't really expect to be paid more. They're just throwing that up as an objection to try and stop the process.
Well, and going back to the training conversation, I mean, that's obviously always something that I'm going to love to talk about. But, the different, I think a lot of times we see within training, the that it is overly routine, right? They see the same training over and over again, and it becomes like that alarm fatigue you were talking about earlier, where you hear the buzzing all the time and it just starts to lack meaning or, affect you in any way. And so that was always one of the big things I tried to focus on in training, is that where's the element of surprise, where there's I'm actually learning something new, or there's some type of surprise. Because I was thinking about this the other day, because I play music as well, and I was like, a key element of writing good music is to follow certain rules, right, that we're used to, but also to introduce elements of surprise in like chord changes, right? Where it's like, like intuitively I'm listening to the song and I think it's going to go this direction, but then the artist throws it into this other thing. And it's like, that creates this like happy tingle in your brain where you're like, oh man, I didn't think it was going to go that way. And that's what makes it interesting. It's why, as we get older, like nursery rhymes just aren't that interesting to us, because they're very basic, right? And so finding ways to introduce these like little twists for people with new pieces of information, or new ways of training, as opposed to just, like you said, bring them into the break room and it's like, here's the PowerPoint that you saw 3 times last year. We're going to go over it again. Finding those ways to break that cycle and create that little bit of dopamine so that it's like, oh man, I didn't think about that. That's interesting. Because that's what people are really looking for, is that they want to learn new stuff. It's just, how is it being delivered?
Yeah, Richard makes a good point here as well. Richard's a very good source on this type of material, as well, as you know quite well, Austin, is behaviors easily modify when it's tied to one's identity. I am someone who, followed by the routine, works wonders, right? Because we have ways that we identify. So to your point then, and kind of building on what Richard is saying here, is I am someone who constantly learns and grows, right? That's breaking that model of how people are thinking about it. I'm reminded of a story. We had in my past a very good plant manager who was very good at motivating his teams in his facility. One of the tools that he would use would be, to your point, Austin, is break routines. And one of the things that he did one time is he set an objective for the plant. It was around safety for the facility. This facility, he was brought in there to help improve it, and they had a terrible safety record. And he said, okay, if we improve our safety record from this to this in the next 6 months, I am going to run through the plant in a Batman suit.
I love that.
And did he do it when the plant was shut down? Yes. He didn't do it during production. But did he do it? And did they hit the goal? Yes and yes. And that's all that plant talked about forever, was the fact that Don ran through the plant. And I saw it. And he had the cape on. He was running through with the cape and everything else, yelling, going, I'm Batman. And the plant just howled. They loved it, because that's not how a plant manager behaves, is it?
Right. And I mean, and that goes to show you where it's like, well, we don't have budget for something, and it's like, get a Batman suit and run through the facility, because that, like, people are going to remember that long beyond just buying them lunch for doing a training at some point, right?
That's a good point. That happened over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm still telling the story.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And
I used to do PPE fashion shows. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Bryan, I'd like to tie in something that we had looked at before as an advantage, which is basically cost saving and operation efficiency based on routines. So once we have things organized and clean and neat, then we are saving money. The downside to that, and especially from leadership, top management, is once things are working very well and it's been established as a cost-saving strategy, it's really hard to, over time, point them in the opposite direction of, well, things are changing, things are getting better, and if we change and do it this way, we will inherently save money. And so routines can be a hindrance to getting better. So it hides inefficiencies that develop over time just based on facilities aging or skill sets changing, the industry changing. I mean, COVID pretty much underlined that. So being able to go back and forth between what is saving money now might not be what's saving money 5 years from now. And investments that seem really good right now might not pay off as you anticipate. So that routines can get in the way of being flexible and adapting and coming up with innovative ways to solve problems, especially when they seem to work well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Morrine. And so that brings up a follow-up on that as well, too, is people don't like change, do they, Austin?
Absolutely not. I don't. I loathe change. But it's always something that I'm working to get people to do, even though I dislike it myself. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, even things that can make your life better or easier, there's still resistance to change because it's just flat out different in the beginning. Yeah, it's, I mean, I've seen, facilities, going back to what, talking about the habits and a lot of what we've talked about is like good habits, but, seeing bad habits, that form over years and years of time. What I see consistently is since I deal with hand washing, I'm always watching people wash their hands as they come into a facility. And it's like, I don't think I've ever seen someone actually do 30 seconds of washing their hands at any facility. But it goes back to one of the things you were talking about earlier, which is that it's like, well, if speed is the priority and speed is what is, management is saying, this is what's most important, then that becomes the norm of, why should I spend so much time washing my hands if I can just do kind of a splash and dash and get on the line. So going back and even breaking bad habits can be really hard. But yeah, it was something that I was wanting to tag onto from earlier conversation. But yeah, sorry, I was just reading Richard's comment here as well about automation. Anyways, but yeah, looking at the just habits in general, both good and bad, it's so hard because of the hardwiring. And I think that's one of the things that we see with the plant walkthrough is that you're hardwired to go through and like look at what you look at. But yeah.
And to your point, Austin, in terms of looking at what we've always looked at, I'd like to pull us into the mindset of the Gemba walk, and more specifically the daily GMP audits, right? We love them, we do them. We do the annual GFSI internal audits. We are always doing audits internally. And it's always fascinating when I talk to my colleagues, just industry-wide, who is on the internal audit team when these assessments are done. If it's the same people every time, guess what? Every time you get similar non-conformances because it's the same people looking at the same thing and their perspective of risk and risk assessment is the same. And even though they're growing and developing in their profession, there's only limited amount of time. And so there's that default set to what do I already know to be a risk. And so even just thinking about the routine things that we need to do internally or as we move between plants, if you have multiple plants and you have a corporate location, bringing in people who are traditionally not involved in the daily assessment of risk as part of that internal annual assessment to help look at risk differently and go into those corners that nobody ever goes to pick up new non-conformances or highlight where things are working really well in one plant, where they can borrow and bring over information of, hey, this unit is doing really well here. Maybe it's something we want to implement over here. It's really hard to do that cross-functional risk assessment if your risk assessment team is 2 people on the quality team that do it every day. You don't learn much new if you keep doing it that way.
It's a good point. Go ahead, Austin. Sorry.
Well, and one of the other things that we should touch on is like the barriers that are out there that prevent. It's easy to talk about like, well, here's these habits and we're trying to change them, but just like with the HACCP plan, every facility is different, right? How the facility is designed, the employees who work there, the languages, that they speak. There's, one company I was doing work for, we had to design the training in like 8 different languages for one plant, not for multiple plants, just that one plant, they had 8 different languages. And so that's the other thing to look at is the uniqueness of the facility and what are some of the elements that have to be considered when trying to make those types of changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to your point on that as well is with each of those different groups, they also bring along their own cultural perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, there was one of the weirdest conversations I've had in the industry was talking to someone about hand washing at their facility. And they said people don't want to wash their hands because they feel that the water is dirtier than what is on their hands, that they ultimately would be contaminating their hands with the city supplied water. And I was like, I don't even know how to address that particular belief system. But that seemed to be a belief within that area of the country, within that town. And I didn't have enough time to do a deep dive into it, if it was like a regional culture thing or if they had contamination in the water at some point. And then, this created this belief system. But yeah, there's every facility, there's, in every group of people, you're going to have these little nuanced beliefs that we have to work with. That, first of all, we have to identify and then start to work on.
If you don't know about them, you can't address them. And in that situation, it could be, well, hey guys, we heard about your concerns about the water from the city. Guess what? We have a filtration system. We're gonna give you a tour, because in a lot of plants, most people don't even. This gets back to the routine thing. We have a water filtrate. We have our own water filtration system here at the plant. We're gonna do a tour of that so everybody can see it. Oh, okay, right, and maybe then that just disappears. And I think part of this too, as we kind of think about these different things, we're giving different tips and tricks here as well. But I also want to emphasize that the other end of the spectrum, like complete routine is bad, complete chaos is bad too. If all you're doing is the quality manager in that plant is disrupting everything, and the plant manager sees his efficiencies and his case per hour going down, they're not going to be happy, right? So you have to pick your battles on these things too. You have to say, all right, what are the things that are going to make the plant better? Let's challenge that. You can't challenge everything. So in my Batman example earlier, Don, the plant manager, had a very specific objective of what he wanted to improve, and he created a methodology to improve his safety rating in that plant, targeting that. It wasn't change everything. So you have to be very selective in what you choose.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a challenge for the two of you. Just thinking about routines and over-reliance on SOPs. And so we know that we need to define SOPs, so what we are going to do and how we are going to do it. Well, that's important, but things rarely happen the SOP way. So SOP is a general guideline of this is how we anticipate this should work. right? Everyone will take a shower and come to work clean, and they'll wear clean clothes, and they will have their nails trimmed and not wear too much perfume. We have those general things that are industry best practices, and we adopt them sometimes blindly because, well, that's what everybody else in the industry does. Like produce, E. coli is probably a problem in produce, so we'll take that as a risk. So transitioning from the need to have SOPs, to your point, Bryan, but the need to be adaptable as things are evolving every day and things are unfolding. If we have an over-reliance where the quality team says this is how it has to be done because this is how we protect customers from foodborne illness, you have to do it this way. All the conversations we have here and on many other forums is always, it depends. Yes, this is how it should work, but it depends on this and this and that. So the challenge, I keep thinking, is how do we have SOPs that are robust enough to allow for critical thinking? And how do we ensure that critical thinking does not become chaos where everybody wants to try a new idea because we are free to have critical thinking?
Yeah.
That's a challenge to the team this morning.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it. It's a great segue because in my book, sitting back there, this is exactly what I talk about. And this is a lesson I figured out earlier in my career, is that, so my answer to that question is I had a two-step process on this. What I would do is if I was looking at a process in a facility, I would go out and be trained essentially by the people doing that task. It's like, okay, pretend I'm a new person in this role, teach me how to do things. So I'm looking for hidden activities we may not know about. I'm looking for standardization. Generally in any process, if you have multiple people doing that process, you're going to have one who does it well. Everybody else is kind of in the middle, and then maybe one other person who does it poorly. You want to emulate the best practices in that area. But, and here's why this triggered this for me, is I would focus in on what do you do if things go wrong? Because generally, SOPs only focus on the process of everything goes perfectly right, step 1 through 20. So the example I use this would be receiving. It's like, okay, well, we bring in the truck and we look at the paperwork. Okay, well, what if the paperwork is wrong? What do you do? What if you don't have the paperwork? What do you do? And that's why we're here as managers, is to help them solve those problems. And if you don't allow them the ability to flex and figure out what do I do in these different contingencies, they're going to make it up on their own. And that's when you have problems.
You know what I was just thinking of? That could be an interesting training opportunity. I always love to find ways to incorporate, storytelling and things like that into the training. And as y'all are talking about this, I'm thinking about the movie with Tom Hanks where he plays Captain Sully, the airline captain, and what they call it, the Miracle on the Hudson or something. Yeah. And that right there is a great example of a mix of him using procedure that has been documented for a situation, but also how he had to figure out what to do in this situation that had never happened before, right? It was just dual engine failure at like 2,000 feet or something like that, something insane that no one's ever trained for because they've just never thought that something like that would happen. So that would be a really interesting opportunity to like show that clip in the class and then be like, okay, how does this tie into our plan, right? Of what we do know, and in his situation, it was like cut the fuel, do flaps, whatever, all the stuff that he knows, by the book, should be done. But then there's also the like, well, okay, now I'm out of options. I can't get this back to the airport. I got to put it down in the river. And that's the like, well, I got to figure out how to make this happen. So that could be an interesting like conversation piece of blending the known and the unknown. And once again, it's a little bit of a shift in that training environment to get people a little bit more engaged.
Oh, that's an interesting concept. I like that. So let's say, for example, in the food plant, you're working with, let's say, some of the more experienced people in the food plant. We'll use the dairy example. We'll say like pasteurizer operators. And you've got 5 people who run the pasteurizer. And you get them in a training for a room. Instead of going through that procedure with them, which they know inside and out, start coming up with scenarios and say, okay, guys, let's say that the RTD thermometer for the return temperature is inaccurate and we don't know it. How would you find out? And see what they say. And you're going to get, I can guarantee, let's say that you have those 5 operators, you're probably going to get 5 different opinions on what you should do in that process. But it's going to get them thinking about it. Just like, okay, you're running this machine, you've got no flaps, you've got no engine power. What do you do? What do you do?
And if we want people to develop critical thinking, then we have to give them the opportunity to think critically. And the safest way to do that is in the training environment, where it's like, here's an opportunity for you to think critically about what would you do in this situation.
Because if it's one thing that we've learned about creating quality systems, is that the more that we try to control every single activity of every single person in that plant, the more we're going to fail.
Autonomy. People need some sense of autonomy in their work.
And it's funny, we've gone full circle to something that I've been exploring a lot lately, recalls. And Bob Manning and I have been chatting about his book. And when we were talking about handling something that has never happened before, but following procedures that are well established, recalls are a good example. Oftentimes we think we are doing mock recalls, but typically what we're doing is just going through that 20-minute checkbox. We did a trace that worked, we did this, that worked. Okay, we've done our requirement for the annual mock activity. And Bob Manning goes around to talk about, unless you've actually lived through a recall, you have no idea what's going to happen in that moment. And even if you've been through one, they're never exactly the same. And so starting to think about, and I recommend that book. I'm not promoting, I'm recommending as a professional development piece. It's written in the design of a handbook for what should you expect when you hear that call, and what will happen, what will most likely happen in the first couple of hours to your mental health, to your team, the people, the chaos. How do you position yourself for success even in such a crisis? But again, that goes to the routine of how we run our mock activities. They tend to be these routine things that we do exactly the same every year. And how are we different this year and positioned better to handle a crisis than we were last year based on what we've learned from the mock activities? Chances are probably not much different if you did exactly the same scenario or a similar scenario, and it was done in a very shallow way as a mock activity. So I think the whole umbrella takeaway from this for me is routines are great, but continuous improvement is critical if we are going to improve as a people, as a profession, as an industry.
No, that's a good lesson. And what was that book recommendation again, Morrine?
I'll put it in the chat for you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, then we can all get a copy of that, because to your point, as we close out our chat here today, and we'll get some closing comments around this, is that if our people are only trained to handle the routine, when the non-routine, and recall situation is perfect example, when the non-routine activity comes up, everybody freezes. They don't know what to do, and then you've got a lot of trouble. Any closing thoughts, guys? Austin, what would you like to leave people with today?
Oh, wow. We covered a lot. So I was looking at Cortland's comment about Apollo 13 is what he uses. That's actually one of my favorite movies because I'm a big NASA nerd. And that is a great example of having very detailed process and procedure, but also having to get creative on the fly in a tragedy. But yeah, final thoughts. I would love to find a way to make it, design a strategy to make it easier for people to look at their facility with fresh eyes. And I'm not sure quite how to do that yet. So that's something that I personally am kind of thinking of, is like, how can you get the benefit of having somebody completely foreign to your environment walking through, and how could you do that yourself? So open to any thoughts or suggestions on LinkedIn if people were willing to say, hey, here's potential ways that you could get that fresh set of eyes yourself.
Yeah, that's challenging. Morrine, anything from you?
I'd say my natural tendency, if you do the self-assessment, my tendency is learning. And so it doesn't take much to get me interested in something. That's a lot of work for some people. I think anybody who's in the food industry space, having natural curiosity is a critical skill. It might not amount to anything, but just always going out with a curious mind by nature breaks routine. When you're curious about things, always asking questions, always looking, always 360, right? Look up. Only quality really ever looks up, right? That's what I would challenge people, even if it is not your natural tendency. And Bryan, the book I was talking about is In the Midst of a Recall by Bob Manning. And he always posts amazing scenarios on LinkedIn for risks in the industry. And it's usually a poll or a comment, some kind of interactive request from colleagues. So take a look, follow him if you'd like. But my challenge is curiosity. Wear your curiosity hat every day, everywhere. Always ask, what more can I learn? What don't I know? For me, it's always what I don't know that drives me crazy. If I know it, then I can handle it. It's always, what don't I know?
Yep. And what we do, that's the scary part, because it's the things that we don't know that get us in trouble, because we don't know that we don't know. So with that, guys, wow, fantastic chat. We could have easily gone for another hour on this, but we don't have another hour. So we're going to have to bring our chat to a close for this week. Thank you, everybody. Wow, that's just fantastic comments here again. I mean, the expertise level that attends these chats just absolutely blows me away. Thank you, everybody, for attending and taking time out of your schedule to be here for this chat. I think this was a really important one. So with that, thank you, Austin. Thank you, Morrine, our experts here for today. Fantastic contribution as well. So with that, we're going to bring our chat to a close here for this week. But of course, we're back here next Friday, same time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll bring two more amazing experts, just like these guys, onto the chat to have a conversation with you. But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Have a great time, and we'll do it all again next week. Thanks again, guys. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we'll see everybody soon.
Awesome. Have a good weekend.